Thanks for staying with us. Budget issues will dominate the discussion this session, and our roundtable is here to weigh in. Peggy Fekak is here from the San Antonio Express News. Ross Ramsey joins us from the Texas Tribune, and we have Karen Brooks from Community Impact and the Dallas Morning News. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
So, the Senate and the House both released their early versions of the budget. What is really the big difference in between the two versions? What do you think?
They both came in really low. They spent about the same amount of money, and both of them said, everybody settle down, this is just the starting point. And it seemed to be kind of more or less in the same place. There's some small differences.
They're very similar. The main difference is that the Senate did not account for Medicaid growth in Medicaid caseload, and they acknowledge that they will have to do that. So yeah, they're both very similar, very lean budget, and saying that they're going to really setting the table for a robust discussion of where to put money, if anywhere.
Is really growth in our state accounted for in this?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And to some extent, I know that they did add some money for increased enrollment in schools. I don't think they left anything to restore any of the cuts from last session. That's one of the big complaints about it. But the growth in enrollment certainly is addressed in those budgets.
One of the things that they left out was any kind of inflation numbers in the Medicaid budget. So they set a Medicaid budget in and said we're going to pay for all 24 months this time for the full 2-year budget cycle, but they didn't allow for any inflation in medical care that they think they'll have to put back in.
Water is something we've talked a lot about so far in these first couple of weeks of the session. Do you feel like that's still going to be a big topic, you know, as we get through this 140 days?
Yeah, everybody's talking about it. That seems to be the issue at the top of everybody's list. I guess Alan Ritter in the House has a $2 billion plan out. David Dewhurst has a $1 billion plan out. Strauss
mentioned it in his opening remarks, and he's been hammering it since the first day. Is it one of his big priorities too, is to come up with an issue, a long-term plan for the state's water problems.
The business groups are really behind doing something about the water problem. They're saying that right now Texas' failure to deal adequately with water and transportation is hurting them and attracting companies. Other states are telling companies looking to locate that Texas hasn't made provisions for water and the traffic is terrible.
And the fact that the money might come from the rainy day fund, is that contentious at all?
It doesn't seem to be. It's kind of ironic, you know, but you know, it's not raining, so we need the rainy day fund. But they are looking at it and saying this is a one-time expenditure. We're going to use it for seed money to start some borrowing programs, some lending programs to try to build the water thing up. And it kind of meets the rules that they've set for themselves on how to use that money in the state savings account.
And it's a healthy state savings account this time around, right? It's what are they saying, 12 billion? Could get up to 12 billion, close to it. So there's not a lot of reticence to use it for what it's designed for. I haven't heard of a lot of backlash outside the Capitol, but certainly the big three don't seem to be fighting about it too much.
And what about possibly using it for other things, like maybe some education funding, anything like that?
There doesn't seem to be any sentiment among the Republican leadership for doing that. There are Democrats who are pushing to do that, given the large amount of money that's in it, as Karen notes. But the Republican leadership is saying, no, that's meant for a one-time expenditure. If you put it into education, even to restore some of the funding that was cut back last time, then that's an expense that will keep being repeated, and you can't keep dipping into the rainy day fund for that year after year.
What about the gun control debate we've been having nationally and here in Texas? It seems like there have been some legislative proposals or ideas to talk about guns in schools.
Yeah, that seems to be the leading one. Is should people on campus, faculty members, teachers, or whomever, be allowed to carry guns, you know, after training and so forth? And it looks to me like the legislature is leaning that way. They haven't actually taken a vote on anything yet, but there's been more talk in the direction of expanding the presence of guns in schools than in pulling back the presence of guns in schools.
Yeah, and I would anticipate a spirited debate to an extent, but this is a state where the House Democratic caucus chairs in the past have been card-carrying NRA members, so you're going to see an ideological fight in terms of expanding or limiting gun rights or expanding guns, you know, in schools or in society. But realistically speaking, I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of issue with some of those going forward. Now, the state-funded training of teachers, firearms training for teachers, and ideas like that. The interesting thing I've heard about that is that the teachers themselves are saying, well, you know, maybe not, maybe there's, and not all the teachers are saying this, but I've seen some of the groups coming out and saying, we might prefer a trained professional on campus as opposed to putting all the teachers or having teachers carrying weapons in the classrooms. Obviously a really divisive issue, but I found interesting that the quick reaction in some of the stories I've been reading has been from the teachers, maybe not us, maybe somebody, maybe put that money or put those resources toward a professional. Right. And then of course you've got the campus carry bill that's resurfaced. Right. On the college campuses, yeah.
Mm-hmm. With those issues, dealing with guns, do you feel like other things are not getting as much focus? Is that kind of taking away from the bigger, I guess, maybe budget conversation, anything like that?
You know, nothing's going to take away from the budget conversation. That's the one bill they have to pass, so they'll always do that. And there's always some issue. Every session they come up with some issue that we either, you know, in this case maybe we expected a little bit or we didn't expect, that eats up a couple of 3 weeks of the session. And I think, you know, this is clearly one of the issues that's going to do that this time.
They go through phases, cycles, street session. It's, you know, it's a big deal right now, and then maybe, you know, the next thing that'll come up will be something, well, right, out of the blue. Exactly. Right. It's he can cover this for however long you've been covering it, and they surprise us every session with something.
Right.
What about all the new people that are in the House and Senate this year?
44 in the House, 6 in the Senate after we replaced Mario Gallegos in the special election. You know, there are a lot of people wandering around the Capitol looking for their parking places in the bathrooms, and it takes a while even for really smart, adept people to figure the system out, and those newcomers are going to be at a disadvantage for a little while during this session.
Mm-hmm. On top of that, you had 33 some odd freshmen in the House last session, so you have almost a majority, or if I'm doing the math right, more than a simple majority of people that have 2 years or less experience, or only one session or no sessions under their belt. So they're calling it one of the most inexperienced houses in recent memory, which, you know, should make for some interesting budget conversations. But, you know, fresh blood is always fun to watch in this session too, you know.
One of the lawmakers I was interested to watch was Donna Campbell over in the Senate side. What do you think we're going to expect from her? I mean, she unseated longtime Jeff Wentworth from his seat.
Well, she's a part of the group of new senators, I think, that is expected to make that chamber more conservative than it has been in the past. She's already been out front with Governor Rick Perry on legislation to impose more restrictions on abortion. So she's new, so my guess is she'll do some listening, but she's also very clearly not afraid to get out there and make her mark on some very conservative issues that Jeff Wentworth would not have had the same position on.
Great. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And remember, the place to turn all session long is KXAN.com. In our legislative section, you can follow all of the complete in-depth coverage we have. There you'll find our guide to how an idea becomes a law in Texas, our list of the major players in state government, and all of our behind-the-scenes coverage from the Capitol. And of course, the most important part of the equation is you. We want to hear from you as the session continues. Email me your thoughts and questions, josh.hinkle@kxan.com, or you can find me on Twitter @HinkleJ. Stay tuned for another look at your morning headlines and weekend forecast. Thanks again for joining us for In Session In Depth.